The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of alien representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating pods, their attention fixed on the massive holographic display at the center of the room. The image showed a small fleet of ships, barely visible against the backdrop of space. These vessels were detected at the edge of Sector 7, announced First Speaker K, his blue skin gleaming under the chamber's lights. They appear to belong to a newly discovered spacefaring species. Admiral Rex stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the floor. The military advisor to the council had overseen countless first contact situations, but something about this one made him laugh. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. "Look at the size of those ships," he said, pointing at the hologram. "They're barely larger than our scout vessels. Are we certain these aren't just some lost mining craft?" The technical officer, Dr. Bell, adjusted her instruments. "No, sir. These are definitely military vessels. Our scans show weapon systems, but—" She paused, double-checking her readings. "They're only 1/5 the size of our standard battleships." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some representatives chuckled, others shook their heads in disbelief. In their experience, bigger meant better. Every advanced civilization built massive ships. It was simply the natural progression of technology. "Tell us more about these tiny warriors," Rex said, not bothering to hide his amusement. Dr. Bell projected another image, this one showing a detailed scan of the alien vessels. "They call themselves humans. Based on our analysis of their communication signals, they've only been in space for about 300 years. Their home planet is called Earth, located in what they call the solar system. Only 300 years. Someone shouted from the upper levels. "We've been traveling the stars for millennia." Rex crossed his arms, his expression growing serious. "Their territory must be rich in resources if they manage to achieve space flight so quickly. What's their military capability?" "We've detected approximately 50 ships of similar size spread across their territory," Dr. Bell reported. "Their weapons appear to be mostly kinetic and energy-based, but nothing our shields can't handle." The first speaker raised his hand for silence. "The question before the council is clear. How do we approach this new species?" Rex stepped forward again. "If I may suggest, First Speaker, these humans are clearly in their infancy as a spacefaring race. Their small ships and limited numbers show they lack the technology and resources of a proper civilization. I recommend we send a diplomatic mission to assess their worlds." The way he said diplomatic mission made several council members smile knowingly. It was a common euphemism for a show of force, followed by resource negotiations that heavily favored the council. "They must have valuable minerals or elements on their worlds," Rex continued. "No species develops space travel so quickly without access to rich resources. We should secure those resources before they waste them on their toy-sized ships." Dr. Bell cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, there is one unusual reading from their ships. The energy signatures are strange, almost as if—" "Thank you, Dr. Bell." Rex cut her off. "But I've seen enough. These humans clearly need our guidance. Their small ships show they haven't mastered proper shipbuilding techniques. It would be irresponsible of us not to intervene." The council members nodded in agreement. After all, their civilization had grown mighty by helping younger species manage their resources. The fact that this help usually resulted in the council claiming the lion's share of those resources was just good business. First Speaker K called for a vote. All in favor of sending a diplomatic fleet to assess the human territories. The chamber lit up with green lights as nearly every representative voted in favor. Only a few pods remained dark, mostly from species who had once been on the receiving end of such diplomatic missions. "The motion passes," K announced. "Admiral Rex, you will oversee the diplomatic fleet. Make sure the humans understand the benefits of joining our galactic community." As the council members filed out of the chamber, Dr. Bell stared at her readings. Something about the human ship's energy signatures bothered her. They were too efficient, too controlled for such a young species. But who would believe her? After all, the ships were so small. If only they had listened to her warnings. If only they had wondered why the ships were small by choice, not necessity. But the Council had made its decision, and the diplomatic fleet would soon be assembled. The humans would surely welcome them with open arms. Wouldn't they? Captain Tom Wells stood at the window of Earth Defense Station Alpha, watching the stars. His reflection showed a man in his 40s, wearing the simple blue uniform of the Earth Defense Force. The calm of space was about to be broken, and he knew it. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Mark from his monitoring station, "we've picked up the alien transmissions again. They're not even trying to hide them this time." Tom smiled. The aliens had no idea that humans had been listening to their communications for the past 50 years. While the Galactic Council thought they were dealing with newcomers to space, humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment. "Play the transmission," Tom ordered, turning from the window. The station's speakers crackled to life. Alien voices filled the room, speaking about a diplomatic mission to human space. Their tone made it clear this was no peaceful visit. "Send everything to Fleet Command," Tom said, "and get me Admiral Stone on the line." Minutes later, the stern face of Fleet Admiral Jane Stone appeared on the main screen. Her gray hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her eyes showed no fear, only determination. "Captain Wells," she said, "your station's intel confirms what our other outposts have reported. The Council is sending what they call a diplomatic fleet. Based on their communications, they've assembled over 200 of their largest warships." "They still think we're primitive," Tom replied. "All because our ships are smaller than theirs." Admiral Stone's face broke into a slight grin. "Then it's time to implement Protocol Ant." Tom nodded. The protocol was named after Earth's smallest but most organized insects. Like ants, human ships were small but worked together with deadly efficiency. It was a lesson the aliens were about to learn the hard way. "Begin the evacuation of our border colonies," Admiral Stone ordered. "Make it look messy, like we're running away in fear. Leave some old equipment behind, nothing too advanced. Let them think they've scared us off." "What about the civilian ships, ma'am?" "Already taken care of. We've been preparing for this for decades, Captain. Every civilian in the border systems knows the drill. They're not really evacuating. They're moving to the hidden bases." Tom watched as his tactical display showed human ships apparently fleeing from the border systems. To any alien observers, it would look like a panicked retreat. They couldn't see that each civilian ship was actually heading to precisely calculated positions, or that the supposedly abandoned colonies were now home to some of humanity's most advanced defense systems. "The Council's ships are huge," Lieutenant Mark commented, looking at the scans of the approaching alien fleet. "Each one is the size of a small city." "Size isn't everything," Tom replied. "They built big because they could, not because they should. They never had to worry about efficiency or innovation. But humans, we had to be clever. We had to be smart." The next few hours were busy as the station coordinated the fake evacuation. Supply ships left half unloaded, buildings were left with doors open, and old outdated technology was scattered about. It would look like humans had fled in terror, too disorganized to even complete their evacuation properly. Admiral Stone's face appeared on the screen again. "Captain, we're picking up new transmissions. The alien fleet commander is laughing about our retreat. He's already planning how to divide up our territories." "Good," Tom said. "The more confident they are, the better this will work. Remember, once they enter our space, maintain radio silence, except for panicked evacuation signals. Let them think they've got us running scared. You've seen the simulations, Captain. We know exactly how this will play out." Tom nodded. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment, building smaller but far more advanced ships, developing technology that would seem impossible to the aliens, while the Council had grown complacent with their big ships and brute force approach. Humans had focused on efficiency, innovation, and coordination. "One last thing, Captain," Admiral Stone said. "Tell your crew to stop grinning. We're supposed to be terrified, remember?" Tom looked around the command center, where every crew member was trying to hide their excited smiles. They all knew what was coming. The aliens thought they were hunting sheep, but they were about to walk into a nest of wolves. "Yes, Mom," Tom replied. "We'll try to look appropriately scared." As the alien fleet approached, Tom couldn't help but think about how history often repeated itself. Throughout human history, bigger armies had looked down on smaller forces, right up until those smaller forces proved them wrong. Now it was humanity's turn to teach that lesson among the stars. Commander Brock stood proudly on the bridge of his massive flagship, Star Crusher. At 3 miles long, it was one of the largest ships in the Galactic Council's diplomatic fleet. The vessel's shadow could cover an entire human city. Not that there were any cities left to cover. The humans had fled at the mere sight of his fleet. "Report," he ordered, his voice filled with amusement. "We've secured the 5th human colony world, Commander," his second-in-command replied. "Like the others, it's mostly abandoned. They left in such a hurry, they didn't even shut down their basic systems." Brock walked to the main viewport, watching as his fleet spread out across what used to be human space. 200 massive warships, each one dwarfing anything the humans had shown them. The sight filled him with pride. "Show me what they left behind," he ordered. The main screen displayed images from the abandoned colony. Half-eaten meals in homes, vehicles left with doors open, and primitive mining equipment scattered about. It was exactly what he'd expected from such a young species. "Sir," one of his officers called out, "we're picking up scattered communications from the humans. Would you like to hear them?" "Why not? Let's hear how they cry as they run." The bridge speakers crackled with human transmissions. "Abandon mining station 6 immediately. They're too big, we can't fight them. Save what you can and retreat." Brock's laughter echoed across the bridge. "These humans are even more pathetic than we thought. Look how they abandoned everything at the first sign of real power." Suddenly, the sensor officer straightened in his chair. "Sir, detecting multiple small objects at the edge of our scanner range. They appear to be human ships." "Put them on screen," Brock ordered, still chuckling. The display showed a group of human vessels, tiny compared to his fleet. They looked like insects next to his mighty warships. Each human ship could probably fit in one of his vessel's cargo bays. "Let's show them how a real Space Force operates," Brock said. "Open a channel to all frequencies. Let's make sure they hear this." Once the channel was open, Brock spoke with all the authority of his position. "Attention, primitive human vessels. You faced the might of the Galactic Council. Your colonies are now under our protection. Your resources will be put to better use by more advanced civilizations. If you surrender now, we may find some minor roles for you in the galactic community." There was a long pause. Then a simple text message appeared on his screen. "Size isn't everything." Before Brock could respond, his sensor officer shouted in alarm. "Sir, the human ships, they're moving in ways that should be impossible." Brock watched in confusion as the human vessels suddenly demonstrated maneuvers that defied normal physics. They turned at right angles without slowing, accelerated instantly without showing engine flares, and moved with a precision his own ships couldn't match. "Impossible," he muttered. "No ship that small should be able to move like that. The G-forces alone would." "Sir," his second-in-command interrupted, "we're detecting energy readings from the human ships. They're unlike anything in our database." The human vessels, previously dismissed as toys, suddenly didn't seem so harmless. They'd moved like dancers among the stars, while his massive warships lumbered through space like the giant targets they were. "Launch fighters," Brock ordered. "Show them what real military power looks like." But as his crews rushed to follow orders, a new message appeared on his screen. "Thank you for entering our space. The demonstration will now begin." Brock felt the first hint of worry creep into his mind. Something wasn't right. The humans were too calm, too coordinated. This didn't feel like the last stand of a primitive species. "Sir," his sensor officer called out again, voice shaking, "we're detecting more ships. Hundreds of them. They're coming from inside the abandoned colonies." As Brock watched, swarms of small human vessels emerged from hidden bases across the supposedly abandoned systems. The humans hadn't fled in fear. They'd been setting a trap. And his mighty fleet had just walked right into it. "All ships, open fire!" Commander Brock roared. The space around his fleet lit up as hundreds of energy weapons fired at the approaching human vessels. What happened next made every alien on the bridge freeze in shock. The energy beams passed straight through the human ships as if they weren't there. Not a single shot connected. The small vessels continued their dance through space, completely unarmed. "Impossible," Brock's weapons officer shouted. "They must have some kind of advanced phasing technology." Before anyone could respond, 3 human corvettes, each no bigger than a standard alien shuttle, approached the Pride of Stars, one of the fleet's largest dreadnoughts. The massive alien ship fired all its weapons, but the human vessels simply phased through the attacks. Then the human ships did something that would be remembered in alien military academies for centuries to come. One corvette fired a small blue pulse. Instantly, all power on the Pride of Stars went dead. The mighty dreadnought, over 4 miles long and carrying a crew of thousands, had been disabled by a ship smaller than its own bridge section. "Report," Brock demanded. "What kind of weapon was that?" "Sir," his science officer replied, hands shaking as she checked her readings. "The humans, they've mastered artificial gravity control at a level we thought impossible. Their ships are small because they don't need massive engines or power cores. They can manipulate gravity itself." On the main screen, Brock watched as more human ships emerged from their hiding places. Each one moved with impossible grace, their size allowing them to slip through gaps in his fleet's formation that his own ships could never use. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures inside their vessels," the sensor officer reported. "The reason they're so small, it's because they've perfected energy efficiency. Their power cores are the size of our backup generators, but they produce 10 times the energy." 2 more alien dreadnoughts went dark as human ships passed by them. No explosions, no destruction. Just precise, surgical strikes that left the ships helpless in space. "Launch all fighters," Brock ordered desperately. Thousands of alien fighter craft poured from the carrier ships. But the humans had planned for this too. Their small ships suddenly split apart, revealing they were actually made of dozens of even smaller drones. The swarm of human drones overwhelmed the alien fighters, disabling them with the same precise energy pulses. "Now you understand." A calm human voice transmitted across all frequencies. "We built small ships not because we had to, but because we chose to. Size was never our limitation, it was our advantage." Brock watched helplessly as his mighty fleet was systematically disabled by ships he had mocked just hours before. The humans weren't just more advanced, they were fighting in ways his people had never even considered. "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, "we're detecting something else. The human ships, they're networked together. Each one is controlled by AI systems that coordinate their movements perfectly. They're not just small, they're smart." A human corvette passed right through the shields of Brock's flagship, as if they didn't exist. The alien crew stared in awe as the tiny ship became visible through the bridge viewport. Now they could see it clearly, sleek, efficient, and built with technology far beyond their understanding. "They're ships," the science officer whispered. "They're not primitive at all. The outer hull is made of metamaterials we've only theorized about. The engine design, it's perfect. Not a single wasted inch of space." Another transmission came through. "Your shields only work against known forms of attack. Commander Brock, we learned that from studying your communications for the past 50 years, just like we learned all your weaknesses while showing you only what we wanted you to see." Within an hour, half of Brock's fleet had been disabled. Not destroyed, just quietly, efficiently powered down. The humans weren't even trying to kill them. This wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. As Brock watched his mighty fleet become helpless, he finally understood. The humans hadn't built small ships because they were primitive. They had built them small because they had mastered space itself in ways his people had never dreamed possible. And now it was too late to do anything about it. "You've seen only a fraction of our capabilities," Admiral Stone's voice echoed across all channels. "Now witness why humanity chose to stay hidden for so long." Commander Brock, standing on his partially disabled flagship, watched in growing horror as space itself seemed to ripple around his fleet. Hundreds of new signatures appeared on his remaining sensors. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, voice trembling. "Those aren't just ships appearing. They're bases. Entire space stations were hidden using some kind of cloaking technology." Massive structures materialized around the alien fleet. Each station housed hundreds of smaller vessels, all waiting for the signal to launch. The humans hadn't just hidden their ships, they'd hidden entire military installations. "Launching drone swarms," a calm human voice announced. What happened next would be written about in military texts across the galaxy for generations to come. From each station poured thousands of unmanned drones, each no bigger than a small shuttle. They moved in perfect formation, like schools of fish in Earth's oceans. "How many?" Brock demanded. At least 10,000 drones," his officer replied, "and each human ship appears to be controlling hundreds of them simultaneously." The truth finally dawned on Brock. The small human ships they'd mocked weren't just warships. They were command centers. Each one coordinated its own fleet of AI-driven drones, all linked together in a vast neural network that no alien system could match. A human corvette approached Brock's flagship, its swarm of drones forming a beautiful but terrifying pattern around it. The alien crew watched in awe as the drones moved with impossible precision, weaving between their massive ships as if they were standing still. "Your ships are too big," came the transmission from the corvette. "Too slow, too predictable. Size isn't strength, adaptability is." To demonstrate this point, the drone swarm suddenly split into smaller groups. Each group targeted a different alien vessel, finding blind spots that existed precisely because the ships were so large. The drones slipped through shield gaps that the aliens had never bothered to fix. After all, what enemy would be small enough to exploit them? "Sir," the weapons officer shouted, "the drones are targeting our weapon systems with surgical precision. They're not trying to destroy the ships, they're just disarming us." Indeed, across the alien fleet, weapon systems went dark one by one. The drones moved too quickly to track, too small to hit, and too numerous to stop. The mighty alien warships, each one large enough to house a small city, were being systematically neutered by vessels smaller than their escape pods. "This is impossible," Brock muttered. "No civilization would choose to build ships this small unless they had to. Unless," his eyes widened as he finally understood, "unless they knew it was better all along." Another human ship approached, trailing its own swarm of drones. Through the viewport, Brock could see its elegant design. No wasted space, no unnecessary bulk, just pure, efficient engineering. Even the drone swarms moved with an economy of motion that made his own ship's movements look clumsy and wasteful. "Maybe now you understand." Admiral Stone's voice returned. "We built small because it made us better. Every cubic meter of our ship serves a purpose. While you were building bigger, we were building smarter." The drone swarms continued their work, methodically disabling weapon systems, engines, and shield generators across the alien fleet. Not a single shot was fired. There was no need for violence when such complete technological superiority was on display. "Look at your own ships, Commander Brock," Stone continued. "How much space is wasted? How much power is lost just moving their massive bulk through space? You built monuments to your pride. We built tools for survival." Brock had no response. How could he? His mighty fleet, the pride of the Galactic Council, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they had laughed at just hours before. And the worst part, the humans were doing it with such efficiency, such precision, that it felt less like a battle and more like a lesson. A very humbling lesson about the dangers of judging by size alone. The bridge of the Star Crusher was silent except for the occasional beeping of failing systems. Commander Brock stared at the main screen, watching as more and more of his fleet's status indicators turned red. Admiral Stone's face appeared on the remaining functional screens across the alien fleet. Despite having just disabled one of the galaxy's most powerful armadas, she looked more disappointed than triumphant. "Commander Brock," she said calmly, "your fleet is now mostly disabled. We offer you the chance to surrender. No lives need to be lost today." Brock clenched his fists. Around his flagship, swarms of human drones held position, their formation creating a beautiful but terrifying web of light. The small human ships, once mocked for their size, now looked like predators among his helpless fleet. "You can't expect the Galactic Council to surrender to Brock struggled to find the words. "To someone smaller." Admiral Stone finished for him. "Your pride has already cost you your fleet's dignity. Don't let it cost your crews their lives." But pride, as it often does, won over reason. Brock turned to his emergency communications officer. "Signal the reserve fleet. Tell them to jump in now." "Sir," his second-in-command whispered, "the reserve fleet is even larger than our main force. If they jump in these close quarters—" "Exactly." Brock smiled madly. "Let's see how their tiny ships handle 30 more dreadnoughts appearing right on top of them." Admiral Stone's expression didn't change. "We gave you a chance, Commander. Remember that." The space around them suddenly lit up as 30 massive portals opened. The reserve fleet, each ship even larger than those in the main fleet, began emerging from faster-than-light travel. But something was wrong. "Sir," the sensor officer shouted. "The human drones, they're emitting some kind of energy field." The human drone swarms had quickly repositioned, creating complex geometric patterns in space. Energy flowed between them, forming massive nets of blue light. As the reserve fleet emerged, they found themselves caught in these energy nets. Their momentum was instantly canceled, their weapons refused to charge, and their engines sputtered into silence. What did you do?" Brock demanded. "We created localized pockets of altered space-time," Admiral Stone explained, as if teaching a child. "Your ships are now floating in areas where their own physics work against them. The bigger the ship, the more effective the trap." The reserve fleet, pride of the Galactic Council, hung helpless in space, caught like flies in a spider's web of human technology. Their massive size, once their greatest strength, had become their greatest weakness. "Impossible," Brock whispered. "No species could have developed such technology without us knowing." "You knew exactly what we wanted you to know," Stone replied. "While you were laughing at our small ships, we were studying your every weakness, your over-reliance on size, your predictable tactics, your outdated understanding of spatial mechanics." A new transmission cut through all channels. "The reserve fleet commander. This is Admiral Cole. Our weapons are useless. The human technology, it's not just advanced, it's revolutionary." Stone suggested. "We had centuries to prepare, to innovate, to perfect. You thought our small ships meant we were primitive. Instead, they showed we had mastered space itself." The human drones continued their work, systematically disabling the reserve fleet just as they had the main fleet. Not a single shot was fired, not a single life was lost. The humans were proving they were not just more advanced, they were more civilized. "Look around you, Commander Brock," Stone said. "Your mighty fleet, both main and reserve, disabled by ships you could barely see. Your weapons, useless against technology you didn't even know could exist. Your tactics, countered before you even made them." Brock sank into his command chair, finally understanding the full scope of his mistake. His fleet had walked into this trap thinking size meant power. Now they were learning, too late, that true power came from innovation, efficiency, and intelligence. Now then, Admiral Stone's voice carried a note of finality. Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Or would you like another demonstration of why bigger isn't always better? Looking at his helpless fleet, Brock knew he had only one choice left. The only question was whether his pride would let him make it. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. On the massive central display, video footage showed their mighty combined fleet hanging helpless in space, surrounded by swarms of tiny human vessels and their drones. Admiral Rex, who had once laughed at the size of human ships, stood before the council with his head bowed. His face showed the shame of someone who had made a terrible mistake. First Speaker K watched the footage again, particularly the part where the human drones had disabled 230 warships without destroying a single one. All this time, he said quietly, they were watching us, learning about us, while we dismissed them as primitive. The humans' request to address the council, announced a junior member, their voice shaking slightly. The chamber's main screen switched to show Admiral Stone, standing on the bridge of her small but terrifyingly advanced ship. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, noticing how efficiently designed the human bridge was compared to their own massive command centers. Honored Council, Stone began, her voice calm but firm. You've seen what happened to your fleet. Now let me show you why it happened. The display split to show different images. Human ships using artificial gravity drives that made traditional massive engines unnecessary, drone swarms that could disable entire fleets without bloodshed, and technology that could bend space itself. For 300 years, Stone continued, we studied the galaxy. We watched how every species built bigger and bigger ships, wasting resources and energy just to show off their power. We chose a different path. She gestured, and the screen showed the interior of a human vessel. Every system, every component was perfectly designed, with no wasted space. It made the Council's massive ships look primitive by comparison. We didn't build small ships because we had to, she explained. We built them because it was better, more efficient, more advanced. While you were building space cathedrals, we were perfecting space needles. First Speaker K stood, his voice heavy with realization. You could have destroyed our fleet. We could have. Stone nodded. But that would have been wasteful, inefficient. Everything about your ships is wasteful. Their size, their power consumption, even their weapons. We wanted to teach you a better way. The council chambers erupted in discussion. Some members were angry, others fascinated. But all of them were realizing the same thing. Humanity hadn't just defeated their fleet, they had shown them a completely new way of thinking about space travel. Admiral Rex stepped forward. I resign my position, he announced. I was wrong about the humans. Completely wrong. The Council needs advisors who can see past size and recognize true advancement. Your resignation is accepted, Kay said. And in your place, we request human advisors to help us. Understand your approach to space technology. Stone smiled. We would be happy to help. In fact, we've already prepared educational programs to help modernize your fleets, starting with basic principles of efficiency and smart design. The council members watched in amazement as Stone showed them preliminary designs for upgraded versions of their ships. Not bigger, but better, smarter, more efficient. But understand this, Stone's voice grew serious. Earth will stand as protector of younger spacefaring races. No more diplomatic missions to steal resources. No more bullying smaller civilizations. The galaxy is changing, and the age of bigger is better is over. First Speaker K nodded slowly. The council accepts these terms, and he seemed to struggle with the words, we apologize for our arrogance. As the meeting concluded, many council members stayed to watch the footage again. They saw how their massive ships, once the pride of their civilizations, had been rendered helpless by vessels they could barely see. The message was clear. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had changed the future of space travel forever. Size had finally met its match in human ingenuity, efficiency, and innovation. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the tiny human ships continued their patrol, standing ready to protect those who might otherwise fall victim to the same prejudices they had overcome. The galaxy had learned an important lesson: never judge a civilization by the size of its ships.